The legendary Axl Rose, walking unnoticed through the streets of Los Angeles, observes a young musician who is about to change his life forever. What happens in the next few minutes defies everything you thought you knew about rock stars. Stay until the end, because this encounter took a turn that nobody saw coming. It was a typical Friday on the Santa Monica Boulevard. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the pavement, while hundreds of people walked hurriedly, absorbed in their phones or conversations. Among the crowd, sitting on a corner near the pier entrance, was Lucas Martinez, a 23-year-old young man with a worn acoustic guitar resting on his knees. His open case in front of him contained barely a few $1 bills and some coins that gleamed faintly under the evening light. Lucas had been playing on that same corner for months. Every day was a constant struggle to capture the attention of passers-by who rushed by at full speed, too busy to stop and listen. But Lucas didn't play out of desperate need. He played because music was the only thing keeping him alive after having lost everything. 6 months ago, he had quit his job at a corporate office, fed up with the monotony and falseness of the environment. His family didn't understand him, his friends abandoned him, and his girlfriend of 5 years left him, telling him he was wasting his life. Now, with barely enough to pay for a shared room in a rundown apartment, Lucas clung to his guitar as if it were his last link to hope. That afternoon, he began playing an acoustic version of Patience by Guns N' Roses. His voice, though without professional training, had a raw and honest quality that occasionally made some pedestrians stop briefly before continuing on their way. What Lucas didn't know was that, among the crowd, someone was watching him with unusual attention. A man of medium height, with a black baseball cap pulled down to his eyebrows, dark sunglasses, and a worn denim jacket, had stopped a few meters away. His hands were buried in his jean pockets, and his posture was relaxed, almost invisible among the constant flow of people. The man listened attentively while Lucas finished the song. There was brief applause from a group of passing tourists, and one of them dropped a $5 bill into the case. Lucas smiled shyly, thanked with a nod, and took a sip of water from a half-empty bottle he had beside him. Then, to Lucas's surprise, the man with the cap approached. His steps were confident but not threatening. He stopped in front of Lucas and stood there, observing him in silence for a moment that seemed eternal. "Do you play here a lot?" asked the man with a rough but curious voice. Lucas looked up, squinting against the sun's glare filtering behind the stranger's figure. "Every day," he responded cautiously. "It's my office." The man nodded slowly, as if evaluating the answer. "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 12, said Lucas, relaxing a bit at the stranger's friendly tone. "But professionally, well, this is as professional as I've been." The man let out a brief, almost ironic laugh. "Professional," he repeated. "Most people don't understand what that means in music." Lucas didn't know how to respond. There was something about this man's presence that made him feel uncomfortable but also intrigued. The stranger crouched down to Lucas's level, resting one knee on the ground. From that position, he looked directly at the guitar. "It's a Martin," observed the man, pointing at the instrument. "A D28, if I'm not mistaken. A bit beaten up, but it has good sound." Lucas blinked, surprised. Not many people could identify a guitar model just by looking at it. "Yes, it was my grandfather's. He left it to me when he died." The man nodded with respect. "The best guitars always have a story." There was a pause before he added, "You played Patience a while ago. It wasn't bad." "Thanks," said Lucas, not knowing whether to take it as a compliment or veiled criticism. "It's one of my favorites." "Mine too," responded the man with a barely perceptible smile. "But you play it like you're asking permission." "That song isn't for asking permission. It's for demanding to be heard." Lucas frowned, processing the words. Before he could respond, the man stood up and pointed at the guitar. "Will you let me try?" Lucas hesitated. His guitar was the most precious thing he had, but something in the stranger's tone made him nod. Carefully, he handed over the instrument. The man took the guitar with an almost ritual reverence, adjusting the strap over his shoulder as if he had done it millions of times before. And then he began to play. The first chords were soft, almost experimental, but then something changed. The guitar seemed to come alive in his hands, each note flowing with a precision and emotion that left Lucas completely paralyzed. The man played an extended version of Patience, but it wasn't simply a repetition. It was a reinterpretation, a conversation between the musician and the instrument that captured the song's essence in a way Lucas had never heard before. The crowd began to stop. First there were 2 people, then 5, then 10. Within minutes, a semicircle had formed around them. People took out their phones, recording the moment, murmuring to each other with expressions of amazement. Lucas watched everything in disbelief. Who was this guy? How could he make a guitar sound like that? When the song ended, there was a brief silence, followed by deafening applause. The man returned the guitar to Lucas with a modest smile. "Thanks," he said simply. "That was incredible," Lucas managed to say, still processing what he had just witnessed. "Who are you?" The man took off his sunglasses, revealing penetrating eyes that seemed to have lived 1,000 lives. "Someone who also started on the streets," he responded enigmatically. Before Lucas could ask more, a middle-aged woman in the crowd shouted, "Oh my God, it's Axl Rose!" The murmur became a frenzy. People began approaching, shouting, asking for autographs and photos. Lucas felt the world move in slow motion. Axl Rose, the Axl Rose, the rock legend. He had been playing his guitar. Axl raised a hand, trying to calm the crowd. Calm down," he said with a tired but genuine smile. He looked at Lucas and gestured for him to come closer. "Come on." Lucas got up, still dazed, following Axl as he made his way through the people. A black vehicle with tinted windows stopped by the curb, and a burly man in a suit quickly got out, opening the back door. "Get in," said Axl, pointing to the interior of the car. Lucas hesitated. "What? Why?" "Because we need to talk," Axl responded simply, "and we can't do it here." With his heart beating a mile a minute, Lucas got in the vehicle. Axl entered behind him, and the car started smoothly, leaving behind the crowd that continued shouting and taking photos. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with what you think will happen. You won't regret it. Inside the car, the silence was almost deafening. Lucas looked out the window, watching the city pass in a blur of lights and shadows. Finally, he dared to speak. "Why did you bring me here?" Axl leaned back in his seat, taking off his cap and running a hand through his hair. "Because I saw something in you," he said bluntly. "Something most people don't have. Passion, honesty. But I also saw something else. Fear." Lucas swallowed. "I'm not afraid." "You're lying," said Axl with an ironic smile. "You're afraid of yourself, afraid of failing, afraid of succeeding, afraid that if you really try to be what you want to be, life will kick you again." The words hit Lucas like a punch to the stomach. "How do you know that?" "Because I went through the same thing," responded Axl, his tone becoming more serious. "When I was your age, I was on the streets of Los Angeles, sleeping in rehearsal studios, eating whatever I could find. People told me I'd never get anywhere, that I was a dreamer, that I should get a real job." Lucas listened in silence, hanging on every word. "But here's the difference," Axl continued. "I decided that I wasn't going to let fear define me. I decided I was going to fail 1,000 times if necessary, but I was never going to stop trying. And you, Lucas, have to make that same decision." "How do you know my name?" Lucas asked, surprised. Axl pointed to the guitar case that Lucas had brought with him. On the inside of the lid, written in permanent marker, was his name. "Pay attention to details," Axl said with a smile. The car stopped in front of a discreet building in a quieter part of the city. Axl got out first, followed by Lucas, who looked around suspiciously. "Where are we?" "At a recording studio," Axl responded. "One I use from time to time. Come on, I want to show you something." They entered the building, passing through a small lobby until they reached a heavy steel door. Axl opened it, revealing a fully equipped recording studio. The walls were covered with acoustic panels, and in the center of the room was a drum kit, several amplifiers, microphones, and a mixing console that looked like it came from a spaceship. "This is yours for the next 2 hours," said Axl, pointing to the space. "I want you to record something, whatever you want. An original song, a cover, whatever. But it has to be something that comes from your soul, not from your head." Lucas was overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Axl leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Because someone did something similar for me many years ago. A guy named Danny, who let me use his studio when I didn't have a penny. He told me that if I ever made it to something, I had to do the same for someone else. And here we are. Lucas felt a lump in his throat. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, Axl responded. Just play. And when you're done, we'll talk. With that, Axl left the recording room, leaving Lucas alone with his thoughts and his guitar. Lucas looked around, still processing everything that had happened in the last 30 minutes. Slowly, he sat in a chair in front of a microphone, tuned his guitar, and closed his eyes. For the first time in months, he felt something he had forgotten. Hope. He began playing a melody he had been composing in his head for weeks, but had never dared to finish. The notes flowed naturally, each chord building on the previous one, creating a musical narrative that told his story. The loss, the struggle, the doubt, but also the determination to keep going. On the other side of the glass, in the control room, Axl listened in silence. Beside him was the studio's sound engineer, an older man with decades of experience in the industry. He has potential, murmured the engineer, adjusting the levels on the console. Axl nodded without taking his eyes off Lucas. More than that, he has something that can't be taught. He has truth. When Lucas finished playing, there was a heavy silence in the air. He slowly opened his eyes, as if waking from a dream. Axl entered the recording room again, with a serious but satisfied expression. That was honest, said Axl. That was real. Now let me ask you something. Do you want to keep playing on the streets, or do you want to try something bigger? Lucas looked at him fixedly. I want to try, but I don't know how. Axl pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to him. This is my manager's contact. Tell him I sent you. He'll help you get some contacts, some gigs at small bars to start. I won't lie to you, it's going to be hard. You're going to fail more than you'll succeed. But if you keep showing what I saw today, you have a chance. Lucas took the card with trembling hands. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, said Axl with a smile. Thank me when you're playing on a stage in front of thousands of people. Until then, prove I wasn't wrong. They left the studio together. Outside, the sun had completely set, and the city glowed with the lights of night. Axl shook Lucas's hand firmly. One last thing, he said. Never let anyone tell you your dream is too big. Dreams aren't too big. People are too small. With that, Axl got into the black car waiting for him and disappeared into the night. Lucas stood on the sidewalk, looking at the card in his hand as if it were an invaluable treasure. That night, back in his small room, Lucas couldn't sleep. He spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day in his mind. It seemed like a dream, but the card on his nightstand was proof that it had all been real. The next morning, Lucas called the number on the card. A professional voice answered on the second ring. Tom Harrison's office. Hello, said Lucas, his voice hesitant. My name is Lucas Martinez. Axl Rose told me to call you. There was a brief pause. Ah, yes. Axl told me about you. Can you come to the office tomorrow at 10? Lucas felt his heart race. Yes, of course. Perfect. I'll send you the address by message. Bring your guitar. The call ended, and Lucas stared at his phone in shock. This was really happening. The following months were a whirlwind. Tom Harrison turned out to be an experienced manager who had worked with dozens of emerging artists. He didn't promise Lucas anything, but he gave him something more valuable, an opportunity. He got Lucas a series of performances at local bars and cafes, small places where he could perfect his art in front of real audiences. At first, it was difficult. There were nights when there were barely 5 people in the audience. There were moments when Lucas questioned if he was doing the right thing. But every time he felt like giving up, he remembered Axl's words. Dreams aren't too big, people are too small. Gradually, things began to change. The crowds grew. People started sharing videos of his performances on social media. A local music blog wrote a glowing review about one of his original songs. And then, 6 months after that encounter in Santa Monica, something unexpected happened. Lucas received a call from Tom. I have news, said the manager with an excited tone. An independent label wants to meet with you. They're interested in recording an EP. Lucas felt his legs weaken. Really? Really? And there's more. Axl asked if you want to open for him at a private show next month. It's a small event, only about 300 people, but they're all industry figures. Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. Yes, yes, of course. On the day of the show, Lucas was more nervous than he had been in his entire life. He arrived at the venue 2 hours early, with his guitar and a mixture of excitement and terror running through his veins. Axl was there, checking the sound equipment. "You got here early," said Axl with a smile. "That's good. It means you care." "I'm terrified," Lucas admitted. "That's good too," Axl responded. "Fear means this really matters to you. Use it. Channel it into your music." That night, Lucas went on stage in front of an audience of producers, label executives, musicians, and critics. His heart was beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. But when he started playing, something changed. Fear transformed into energy. Doubt became determination. He played 4 songs, all originals, all coming from the deepest part of his soul. When he finished, the applause was genuine and prolonged. As he came off stage, Axl was waiting with a proud smile. "You did it," said Axl, shaking his hand. "Now the rest is up to you." Lucas nodded, knowing this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. But for the first time in years, he felt he was on the right path. If you made it this far and want to keep seeing inspiring stories like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Before continuing, what you're about to hear is disturbing. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What follows is based on public statements, archived interviews, and testimonies from people close to Axl Rose during the peak of Guns N' Roses, the band that dominated the rock world in the late 80s and early 90s. The day Axl Rose broke his silence, nobody saw it coming. It wasn't in a planned interview, it wasn't in an authorized documentary. It was in a live stream from his house in Malibu, unfiltered, without managers, without a script. Just him, a camera, and a half-finished bottle of whiskey. For almost 2 hours, he spoke non-stop. And what he said left the rock world paralyzed. "I've carried this for over 30 years, he began. "And if I don't say it now, I'm going to take it to my grave. But I don't want to die with this inside anymore." Axl Rose leaned back on the black leather couch. He wore a worn cap, dark glasses, and a sleeveless t-shirt. He looked tired, but not defeated. There was something in his gaze, something that had been hidden for decades behind the stage fury, behind the scandals, behind the image of the uncontrollable rock star. He started talking about 1991, the year Guns N' Roses released the albums Use Your Illusion I and II. Double albums, massive tours, magazine covers, million-dollar contracts. The world was at their feet. "We were untouchable," he said. "We had total control, or so we thought." It was then when he received a call from a record label executive, someone Axl preferred not to name directly, but whose initials he dropped several times during the broadcast. They told him there was an exclusive meeting at a private mansion on the outskirts of Los Angeles. It wasn't a common party, it was a power meeting where covers, contracts, and careers were decided. "They told me that if I wanted to stay relevant, I had to go," Axl recalled. "That the people who really moved the industry were there, the ones who decided who rose and who disappeared." He arrived one October night, accompanied only by his driver. The mansion was hidden behind a hill, surrounded by trees and without signs. At the entrance, 2 men in black suits were waiting for him. They took his phone, asked him to sign a confidentiality agreement, and handed him a silver mask. "All guests must wear it," they told him. "It's part of the ritual." Axl entered, and what he saw immediately disconcerted him. There were legendary musicians, movie actors, Hollywood producers, all with masks, all in silence. The music was low, almost hypnotic. There were candles in every corner and a strange smell in the air, like incense mixed with something chemical. "I didn't feel welcome," Axl confessed. "I felt watched, as if I was being evaluated." A tall man, dressed in a black robe, approached him and extended his hand. "Welcome, Axl. It was about time you joined the family." Axl didn't recognize the voice immediately, but later found out who it was: a producer with decades of influence. Someone who had worked with iconic bands and had connections at all levels of the industry. They took him to an interior room. There was a long table, covered with a dark red tablecloth. Around it sat about 15 people, all with masks, all motionless. In the center of the table was something covered with a black cloth. The man in the robe spoke. "Tonight is about loyalty, about demonstrating that you're willing to cross lines to stay at the top, because greatness is not for the weak." Axl felt a knot in his stomach. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't leave. I felt that if I did, everything I had built would crumble. Then they uncovered what was in the center of the table. It was a human skull, or at least it seemed so. It was decorated with embedded stones and engraved symbols. "This represents sacrifice," the man said. "The sacrifice of the old to be reborn in the new. Whoever kisses this skull will be blessed with eternal success." One by one, the guests stood up and did it. Axl watched in horror as figures he admired, people he had listened to on the radio all his life, knelt and kissed that object without hesitation. When his turn came, he froze. "I couldn't do it," Axl said with a broken voice. "I stood up and said no, that I hadn't come for that my music didn't need rituals to be real." The silence in the room was crushing. The man in the robe approached slowly. "Are you sure, Axl? Because once you reject this, there's no going back." The doors close. Axl nodded. "I'm sure." He left that mansion that same night. He never spoke again with anyone who was there. And from that moment on, everything changed. The following weeks were strange. Axl noticed that his manager started acting different, more distant, more evasive. The interviews he had scheduled were canceled without explanation. The contracts that were almost signed remained up in the air. "Nobody told me anything directly," he explained, "but something had changed. It was as if I had been marked." One day, one of his guitarists, someone he trusted, confessed something to him in private. "Axl, there are rumors. They say you rejected something important, that you didn't follow the rules. And that has consequences." Axl asked what kind of consequences. The guitarist only said, "Your name doesn't sound the same in the offices anymore. Now you're a risk." That was the first time Axl understood that it wasn't just about music. It was about control, about loyalty to a system that operated in the shadows. They don't fire you. They don't publicly cancel you. They simply stop opening doors for you. They isolate you until you become irrelevant. During the following months, Axl began to notice patterns. Bands that used to respect him now avoided him. Producers who wanted to work with him suddenly had other projects. Even some of his own bandmates began to distance themselves. "I felt betrayed," he admitted. "But worse than that, I felt alone. Because I knew that if I spoke, nobody would believe me. And if someone believed me, they would also be marked." Axl revealed that he tried to move forward as if nothing had happened. He composed new songs, planned tours, gave interviews, but something inside him had broken. "I wasn't the same. The rage I used to use to create now consumed me. I became paranoid, explosive, and the world thought I had simply gone crazy." He started drinking more, fighting with everyone, canceling shows without apparent reason. The press said I was a diva, that I was unstable, but nobody asked why. Nobody wanted to know what had happened to me. One day, in the middle of a tour in Europe, Axl had a breakdown. He was in his dressing room, alone, looking at himself in the mirror. "I saw a stranger. I didn't recognize myself. And in that moment, I knew that if I continued like this, I was going to die not physically, but inside." He decided to withdraw. He didn't announce an official retirement. He simply stopped appearing. He stopped doing interviews, stopped getting on stages. He took refuge in his house, surrounded by few trusted people. "I needed to heal. I needed to understand what had happened to me and why it affected me so much." Years passed. Guns N' Roses continued to exist, but without the same energy. Axl came out from time to time, played some shows, but he was no longer the same. People thought I had lost the passion, but it wasn't that. I had lost my innocence. During that time, Axl began to investigate. He spoke with veteran musicians, with people who had been in the industry since the 60 seconds and 70 seconds. And they all told him the same thing, that what he had experienced wasn't an isolated case, that those meetings had existed for decades, that many of rock's legends had gone through the same thing. Some accepted and became legends. Others rejected and were erased from history. And a few, like me, remained in limbo, neither inside nor outside. Axl mentioned that he even had contact with the family of a deceased musician, someone who had spoken publicly about industry control before dying. They told me he tried to warn others, that he left recorded messages, lost interviews, but nobody took him seriously until it was too late. It was then that Axl decided that someday he would speak, that he wasn't going to die with that secret. But I was afraid of what could happen, afraid they would call me crazy, afraid nobody would believe me. And so he lived for years, silent, watching from afar as the industry kept functioning the same, seeing how new generations of artists fell into the same traps, seeing how the system remained intact until today. Axl explained that what motivated him to speak was seeing other artists begin to break the silence. I saw young musicians talking about abusive contracts, manipulation, control, and I realized that if I didn't speak now, I was being complicit. He said that for years he carried the guilt of having stayed silent. I thought about all those who came after me, about those who maybe went to those meetings because nobody warned them, and I wondered if I could have prevented that. If you've made it this far and want to keep discovering stories nobody else tells, subscribe to the channel. But he also clarified that he doesn't regret having rejected what they asked of him. I could have had more success. I could have been bigger, but I would have lost my soul in the process. And I prefer to be a fallen rock star than a puppet at the top. Axl spoke about how that night at the mansion changed him forever. It didn't just destroy my career. It destroyed my trust in people, in the industry, in everything I believed was real. He revealed that for years he had nightmares, that he saw those silver masks in his dreams, that he heard the voice of the man in the robe telling him, "There's no going back." I would wake up sweating, feeling like I had made a mistake. But then I realized that the mistake would have been staying. He also spoke about how it affected his personal relationships. I couldn't trust anyone. Every time someone approached me, I thought they were part of the system, that they were watching me. I became a hermit. His closest friends told him to seek help, to go to therapy. And I did. But how do you explain to a therapist that you rejected a pact in a secret mansion, and that's why your career collapsed? It sounds like madness. Axl said what hurt him most was seeing how some of his own bandmates distanced themselves. Not because they hated me, but because they were afraid of being associated with me. Because they knew I was a problem now. One of them told him privately, "Axl, I can't be around you. It's not personal, but I have a family, I have contracts. I can't risk it." That broke me, he confessed, because I realized that the system was stronger than any friendship, than any loyalty. Axl also revealed that he tried to talk to journalists on several occasions. I told them what had happened. Some listened attentively, but in the end, none published anything. They told me they needed more proof, that it was too dangerous, that it could ruin their careers. That's when I understood it wasn't just me, it was everyone. Everyone was afraid. For years, Axl took refuge in music, but in a different way. I no longer composed for the masses. I composed for myself, to heal, to understand. He wrote dozens of songs that never saw the light. They were too personal, too raw. They talked about things the world wasn't ready to hear. One of those songs, he said, was called The Broken Pact. It talked exactly about that night, about the mask, the skull, the choice. But I never officially recorded it. I knew that if I did, it would be my end. Axl also mentioned that during those dark years, he thought about suicide more than once. Not because I wanted to die, but because I didn't know how to keep living with that weight. I felt trapped between two worlds, the one I left and the one I could never reach. But something always stopped him. I thought about the fans, about the people who wrote me letters saying my music had saved them. And I realized that if I gave up, I would be betraying them. Axl explained that over time, he learned to live with the pain. It didn't disappear, but I learned to carry it differently. I stopped seeing it as a curse and started seeing it as a test that I still had some humanity. He also started to completely distance himself from the industry. I stopped going to award shows, stopped seeking validation, because I realized that the validation I was looking for came from the same system that had destroyed me. And in that process, he found a kind of peace. It wasn't the life I imagined, but it was mine, and it was real. Axl said that for years he watched other artists go through the same thing he did. I saw young musicians arrive with all the energy in the world and in a few years be empty, and I knew exactly what had happened to them. Some contacted him privately. They asked me if what was rumored was true, if those meetings existed, and I told them the truth. But most didn't believe me. They thought it was paranoia from someone who was no longer at the top. That also hurt me, because I knew they were going to fall into the same trap and there was nothing I could do. Axl revealed that a few years ago, a young musician visited him. He told me he had been invited to a private meeting, that they had told him it was a unique opportunity. He asked me if he should go. Axl looked him in the eyes and told him, "If you go, you'll never be the same again." And not in a good way. The musician didn't go, and weeks later, his contract was canceled. He wrote to me saying I was right, that he had lost everything for not going. But he also thanked me, because at least he kept his soul. That conversation made me realize that speaking did help, even if it was to save just one person. Axl also spoke about how technology changed everything. Before it was easier to hide things, but now with social media, with leaks, with people speaking openly, the system started to crack. He said that in recent years, he saw how more and more artists began to talk about similar experiences. Not always in the same way, but with the same background. Control, manipulation, strange rituals. And I realized I was no longer alone. That the moment to speak had finally arrived. Axl explained that he decided to do it now because he feels it's his last opportunity. "I'm not young. I have nothing to lose. And if I don't say it now, I'll take it to my grave." He also said he does it for all those who couldn't speak, for those who died silent, for those who were destroyed and forgotten, for those who are still trapped. This testimony isn't just mine, it's for all of them. Axl took a long pause. He took a drink of whiskey and looked directly at the camera. Hollywood, music, entertainment, everything works with the same rule: obey or disappear. And I chose to disappear rather than obey. I could have been bigger, I could have been an untouchable legend, but I would have had to sell myself, and that price was too high. He said he doesn't expect everyone to believe him. "I know many will think I'm crazy, that I make things up, that I'm seeking attention, but I don't care, because I know what I saw, and I know what I lived. And if a single person who hears this decides not to enter that mansion, then it was worth it." Axl also spoke about the emotional price he paid for decades. "There are days I wonder what my life would have been like if I had said yes that night. If I had kissed that skull, if I had closed my eyes and simply obeyed like everyone else." He was silent for a moment. "I probably would have more money, more awards, more recognition. But every time I looked in the mirror, I would have to see someone who sold the only thing that really matters." Axl revealed that in those years of isolation, he also lost important relationships. Lifelong friendships vanished. People I thought would always be there disappeared when I needed them most. And I don't blame them. The industry has a way of making you choose between loyalty and survival. He recalled a particularly painful conversation with a close friend. He told me, "Axl, I can't keep defending you. People ask me why I keep talking to you, and I don't know what to answer anymore." I asked him what I had done wrong, and he said, "Nothing. That's the problem. You didn't do anything you were supposed to do." That phrase haunted him for years, because he was right. In that world, doing the right thing is considered a mistake, and doing nothing when they ask you is the worst crime of all. Axl also spoke about specific moments when he felt the weight of his decision. There was an award ceremony where I had been nominated. I was sitting in the audience and I saw how all the other musicians greeted each other, laughed, hugged, and nobody approached me. It was as if I were invisible. At one point, one of the presenters made a joke about artists who mysteriously disappeared, and everyone laughed. I knew they were talking about me. Not directly, but the message was clear. This is what happens when you don't play the game. But what affected him most wasn't the industry's rejection, but the silence of those who knew the truth. There were people in that room who were with me that night, who saw the same thing I did, who felt just as uncomfortable. But when they left there, they chose to forget. They chose to pretend it never happened. And I was left alone with the memory. Axl described how paranoia took over his life. I started seeing signs everywhere. Every time a project was canceled, I thought it was because of them. Every time someone stopped answering my calls, I assumed they had received instructions. And maybe I was right. Or maybe I became so obsessed that I saw it even where it wasn't. That's another way they destroy you. They don't just isolate you, they make you doubt your own perception of reality. He also revealed that he tried to return to the big leagues several times. I thought that maybe if I waited long enough, if I behaved well, if I showed I was no longer a threat, they would let me back. So I accepted small projects, did minor collaborations, tried to rebuild bridges. But there was always an invisible ceiling. I could get to a certain point, but never beyond. It was as if they had put a ceiling on me that I couldn't break through no matter how much talent I had or how hard I worked. Axl confessed there were moments of weakness. There were nights when I thought about calling that producer, telling him I was ready, that I had been young and naive, that now I understood how things worked and that I wanted a second chance. He stopped and shook his head. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered his eyes that night. The coldness, the certainty that he had me exactly where he wanted, and I hung up. Because I knew that if I went back, I would no longer be me. I would be a hollow version of myself. And I preferred to be nobody being myself than someone important being someone else. Axl spoke about how he found comfort in unexpected places. I started hanging out with people outside the industry, people who didn't know who Axl Rose was or didn't care. And it was liberating. For the first time in years, I could have real conversations. I could laugh without feeling like every word was being analyzed. I discovered there's life beyond the stages, and that life can be just as meaningful, even if it doesn't come with applause. He also found refuge in art in other ways. I started painting, writing, not to publish or sell, just to express myself. And I realized that during all those years at the top, I had never really created for myself. It was always for the audience, for the critics, for the executives. Now I was finally creating freely, and it was addictive. Axl explained that he learned lessons he would never have learned if he had stayed at the top. I learned about humility, about gratitude, about what it really means to be successful. Because success isn't how many records you sell or how many stadiums you fill. It's being able to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize yourself. And for years in Hollywood, I didn't recognize myself. I was a construction, a character, a brand, but I wasn't me. He revealed that the decision to speak now wasn't impulsive. I thought about it for months. I spoke with my family, with my close friends, with a lawyer. They all told me it was dangerous, that there could be legal consequences, that I could ruin any chance of ever coming back. But I came to the conclusion that there was nothing left to lose, and that maybe, just maybe, my story could help someone else not make the same mistakes I did. Axl looked directly at the camera with renewed intensity. To all the young artists who are listening to this, when that invitation arrives, and believe me, it will arrive if you have enough talent, remember that not everything that glitters is gold. Some of those sparkles are chains. They're going to promise you the world. They're going to tell you it's just one night, that it's just a symbol, that everyone does it. And technically they're right, everyone does it. But that doesn't mean it's right. He paused. They're going to make you feel special for being invited, like you've been chosen, like you've finally reached the inner circle. But that circle is a trap. And once you enter, it's almost impossible to get out. Axl ended by saying something that resonated deeply. The industry doesn't take your voice away suddenly. It turns it off little by little. First, it takes away your platform, then your credibility, then your dignity. And when you have nothing left, they convince you that you never had anything. But I still have my voice, and today I use it. The broadcast ended. Axl turned off the camera without saying goodbye, without background music, without effects, just silence. In the following hours, the video went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Some supported him, others attacked him, but nobody remained indifferent. Because Axl Rose, the man who was once the king of rock, had just done something more dangerous than any song, Tell the Truth. If you made it this far, leave your comment and subscribe for more stories like this.